나처럼 groovy하게 나처럼 groovy하게.
I hope you're subscribed to my channel because you believe I have impeccable taste, but I'll admit, I've had some questionable choices in the music department over the years. I thought it would be fun to look back on my Spotify Wrapped from 2016 to 2021 just to see how much my tastes have shifted and how cringy I find my old playlists to be now. Fair warning, I don't get into K-pop that much until the 2018 section, so if that's the only thing you're interested in, just skip to it with the timestamp. Let's get started! The fact that a Chainsmokers song was my most played song of that year makes me just die a little inside. I feel like I didn't have a strong sense of musical identity at the time. I had just gotten out of my first boy group and girl group phase, but I hadn't quite warmed up to K-pop at the time. If I had to summarize this in one word, it would be basic. Most of these songs are just radio hits and admittedly bland EDM songs. My top artist from 2016 was Panic! At the Disco. I actually still really love their music. I feel like they constantly reinvent their sound with each album, and I guess it's not a shocker coming from a Red Velvet fan that I really like the variety. It's been over 3 years since their last album dropped, which makes me realize how lucky I am as a K-pop fan to constantly get new music and content, but Brendan Urie is so involved with the production and recording process that I genuinely don't mind waiting. I was also starting to get really into musicals at the time, which is why there ended up being several songs from Hamilton, the cast of Glee, and various Disney movies. Oh my god, I don't think you guys realize what a cultural phenomenon Glee was unless you experienced that era. Like, looking back, the show was absolutely awful, and the characters were all annoying as hell, but people at my school were obsessed. I will say Taylor Swift was snubbed from the Wrapped list. I don't think her music was on Spotify at the time. Yeah, kids today will never understand the struggle. Overall, I give this playlist a 6 out of 10. I don't hate the majority of these songs, but there's just a severe lack of flavor. I do want to give a shout out to Girls' Generation though for being the first K-pop artist to make it into Wrapped. Even back during my K-pop anti-years, aka the dark ages, I still love them and I have proof.
To do is stay a minute, just take your time. Climb these hills, I'm reaching for the heights and chasing all the lights that shine. There's a million things I haven't done, but just you wait. I'm well aware of certain things that can destroy a man like me. Who's gonna walk you through the dark side of the morning?
Out of all of my Wrapped playlists, this one was my most confusing. This playlist has pretty much everything from pop to Broadway to film scores. Hamilton Mania really seized my life at this point. I did community theater for a little bit, and during our breaks, everybody would be singing along to the songs. It wasn't just a drama thing though. I literally remember driving back from academic competitions and jamming out to the soundtrack. This was also the peak of my quote-unquote emo phase. I use air quotes because I liked pop-punk music, but I was like the least rebellious person you could ever meet. The reason I would blast these songs in the middle of the night was so that I wouldn't fall asleep while studying. this was also the year that I discovered Dua Lipa. I personally loved her debut album, but people were so mean to her for no reason. Basically, she got the twice 2017 treatment, like people would call her boring and say she had no stage presence. So I'm proud of how far she's come because once she dropped Future Nostalgia, everybody shut up real quick. Ed Sheeran was my most played artist in 2017. I feel like people hate him now, and I don't understand why, unless he did something problematic that I'm just not aware of. Like, I know Permission to Dance was boring, but his earlier albums feel a lot more personal and meaningful. I think it might just be that his music was overplayed and the quality has admittedly gone down since Divide, but I remember people being really excited for his music in 2017. I don't think I had any K-pop songs this year in the Wrapped playlist, but I was starting to warm up to it. I distinctly remember hearing a Blackpink song in the pilot of a show that I watched. Anyways, this playlist gets a 7 out of 10. I think the song choices are good on their own, but this just has so many random shifts in genre. Yeah, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. During 2018, K-pop became kind of inescapable for me. I first realized how popular it had become on Valentine's Day. One of my friends and I wanted to buy a singing Valentine of one of our friends who was performing DNA, but we actually got assigned someone else because she was requested by so many people. Then for the entire spring semester, there was this group of guys who would just watch BTS interviews in class. And at the time, a lot of my friends started sharing their love for K-pop because apparently they had liked it for years and I just never knew. I think the constant exposure wore me down and, well, here we are. This playlist is actually a little inaccurate. I actually downloaded several of Red Velvet and Blackpink songs to my phone that year, and I basically just listened to only those two groups for a solid month, but it wasn't through Spotify, so it wasn't counted. Red Velvet was definitely my most played artist of the year, though. They were the group that not only made me fall in love with K-pop, but made me more interested in exploring full albums instead of promotional title tracks. I was just beginning to scratch the surface of K-pop at the time, so most of the songs on here are considered classics by bigger groups or were just really popular at the time. I hadn't completely given up on Western music though. I'd say there was probably a 60-40 split with K-pop and pop here. Overall, I'd give this playlist an 8.5 out of 10. This was my personal favorite Wrapped year, but there were a couple songs that I kind of forced myself to replay because they were popular. At this point, I had fallen far down enough the K-pop rabbit hole to feel motivated to start this channel. This was the peak of my SM Stan era. Literally 90% of this playlist is just SM groups and Day 6. EXO was by far the most played artist of this year, even discounting all of their solo OSTs that made the list. It's kind of ironic because EXO was the first group I had been introduced to and I just didn't like them at the time. I guess it goes to show how things can come around full circle. I also really fell in love with Day 6 since their music was more along the lines of the Western music that I like. Even though this playlist was entirely K-pop, I remember feeling like 2019 was a bit of a letdown in comparison to previous years. Compounded by all of the stuff that happened at the end of the year, I just don't have the fondest memories associated with music that year. I would give this playlist a 6.5 out of 10. I still love a lot of these songs, but there's just not a lot of variety here.
2020 데시벨들만 나는 비밀로 해줘.
나처럼 groovy hot. Jealous. 시간이 없어 jealous.
주문을 외우더니
여름 향기가 날 춤추게 해. 오늘 사랑이 타타타타타 자존심은 나.
And the saga of overplaying my top artist continues. I distinctly remember feeling like I would never care about another boy group as much as EXO, but then I started watching Roan and Chani's dramas, which made me go through SF9's interviews as a group and made me want to explore their discography further. Ironically, I think my first exposure to them had been because Chanyeol posted a picture of their Narcissus album in 2019, and I really liked it, but I just forgot about them for a little bit. I also got into April for a hot second because of Naon's dramas. I absolutely love Extraordinary You and 18. Because of the pandemic, I had a lot of time to listen to music, but I have a tendency to repeat the same songs over and over again instead of seeking out new B-sides, which I feel like is kind of evident from this mix. I also started to really fall in love with Ace this year. Their Goblin Favorite Boys comeback is honestly my favorite K-pop comeback ever. Explaining everything that makes it so phenomenal would honestly warrant a video on its own. Overall, I would give this a 7.5 out of 10. Once you get past the songs I overplayed, there's a pretty solid mix of songs that I think are timeless.
love so sweet.
You just can't get enough. Baby, I'm yours. Love is not a dangerous.
캔디보다 달콤하게 초콜릿보다 달콤하게
Baby, take me higher. 너무 아름다워. Somewhere just you and I can relax as long as you're down.
Finally, we have reached the end. I think I did a much better job this year of preventing myself from overplaying songs. While I think this was kind of a mediocre year for K-pop, I explored a lot more underrated groups and found some hidden gems I really love. I definitely think that there were some snubs based on the Wrapped cutoff date for this year though. I've played a lot of songs from Woods' new album within the past month, yet only one song is there. The Feels and Twice's latest album, for that matter, were also definitely snubbed. I think Western debuts are going to be the new Japanese debuts based on this year's trends, but the quality of music has improved so much compared to 2 or 3 years ago. This is literally my first time since 2017 that a song in English has topped my list, plus I had more non-K-pop artists here than I had in the previous 2 years. I would give this an 8 out of 10 overall, but we'll see if I feel like coming back to this playlist in the future. Overall, I don't think my playlists were as bad as I was expecting them to be, but there were definitely some questionable songs in the mix. Now, I want to know what the most embarrassing song on your Spotify Wrapped was. It can be from any year. And if you don't feel like answering that, at least tell me what your top song and artist was from this year. I hope you enjoyed this walk down memory lane with me. Thank you so much for watching.